welcome to What's Your Books blog. I'm Stephanie Edwards. I'm a romantic suspense author based in Tennessee. And here with me tonight, I have Jocelyn M. Lacey and Courtney Turner Hoyle. Ladies, would you like to introduce yourselves and talk about your books?
I'm Courtney Turner Hoyle. I've written quite a few books, but most recently I have published Hollis's Hobby. It's a thriller about a female serial killer, and it's available at Amazon, Barnes and Noble, anywhere fine books are sold. Also, be sure to check out Solomon's Tears. It was published in August, and it is a paranormal suspense. Jocelyn?
Hi, I'm Jocelyn Lacey, and I was born and raised in Johnson City, Tennessee. I now live in Kennebunkport, Maine, and I am a children's book author. I have so far published 4 children's books, one about a mermaid, a peacock, police officers, and my most recent one is in memory of a friend of mine who died young, and it talks about her journey to heaven and how she goes to heaven, and doesn't say how she gets to heaven, but that she goes to heaven and is questioning God while her time on earth was cut short. And he's explaining to her how she can still make a difference from heaven through her parents, and her legacy and memory live on.
Well, you've lived in Tennessee, you've lived in Maine. Would you like to tell us about the other places that you've lived?
Yes. So I actually, right after, I've lived between my junior and senior years of college. I went out and worked at Yellowstone National Park. So I lived at Yellowstone in Wyoming and Montana. And then right after I graduated from East Tennessee State University, I went back out to Yellowstone and had another little stint out there. And then after that, I moved to Indiana for about a year, had my first real job with benefits. And so when my husband decided that he wanted to go back to school and study yacht design, that's what brought us up to Maine. We also lived in Rhode Island, the Outer Banks of North Carolina, and New Jersey. And then we moved back to Maine about 4.5 years ago. So people ask us if we're military, and we say no. I joke that we're on the lam. No one can ever find us, but it's definitely been an adventure, and it's life is so fun and suspenseful. You just never know where you're going to end up. So yeah, so it's been quite the adventure for us.
Wow, that's amazing. Was it any certain town or place that maybe inspired you to become a writer, or when did you decide that you wanted to become a writer?
So when I was little, I had actually written, probably about when I was 8, I'd written a couple short stories here and there. But when I was in college, well, I kind of got into writing. I don't want to say accidentally, but in school, my strong subject was English and spelling, and math and science, and I did not get along. So yeah, so unfortunately, 3 days before my high school graduation, my dad died of cancer, and so that was, a very, turning point in my life. And then in college, I had a very traumatic experience happen to me. I was diagnosed with depression, and just didn't want to be on earth anymore. I'm getting a little deep here, but I'm an open book. And so I just kind of felt God. I'm a very spiritual woman. I'm a woman of faith. I kind of felt God leading me to write a memoir about my life. Maybe, my story and my testimony can help other people. But I found that when I came up to Maine, when I was getting ready to sit down and kind of write the experiences of my life, I wasn't ready to go to those dark places yet. So I was in Maine, around on the coast of Maine, and around the ocean. So I sat down and just wrote a little children's story about a mermaid that lives off the coast of Maine. And she goes to her first sleepover and she's nervous about going because she still has her baby blanket that she'd had ever since she was born. And her baby blanket has little lobsters on it, because it reminds her, where she lives off the coast of Maine, and Maine is known for its lobsters. So that's really what inspired me to become a children's book author. Was It was more fun, more innocent, and I could deal with that at that certain point in my life. And I do have personal experience with that too, because I still have my baby blanket that I've had ever since I was little. And so I just was able to relate with that. So I wrote that, and then I sat on it for a long time because I wasn't sure what to do with it. I didn't know if I should self-publish or if I should write, big companies in New York. Like, I didn't know what the next step was. So I sat on it for quite a few years. And then when I went to New Jersey, there was a peacock that showed up at our back door. And it was the most random thing ever. And my husband, we had just moved to our new house, and he had to go to Pennsylvania for job training. And here I was in New Jersey, and the only thing we knew about New Jersey was The Sopranos, and mafia related stuff. And I wasn't scared so much because, we had two big dogs and they're protective, but I was like, I don't know anybody. And again, it's New Jersey. Like, I don't know. And like, I'm kind of a fish out of water anyway, because I'm so friendly and I have to kind of be careful because not everyone's a good person and not everyone will have my best interest. And so there was this peacock that showed up at the back door, and I took a picture of it, and I thought it was the most random thing. And I sent it to some friends of mine and family members. And my mother-in-law actually told me, she said, well, do you know what peacocks stand for? And I didn't. And she said, they're known for their watchfulness and protectiveness. So apparently on the feathers, they have like the little circle on there. It's apparently supposed to be like symbolizing an eye. So they're watchful and protected, protection and all that. So I hadn't met any neighbors yet. So for all I knew, it was a pet peacock that belonged to somebody. So as I got to know neighbors, I was like, do you have a pet peacock? Or does anyone in the neighborhood have a pet peacock? No one had a peacock. And that was the first and last time I ever saw it. So for me, I kind of felt like it was a sign from God that was like, I'm watching you, I'm protecting you, you're fine. So then when I started, I was like, I'm going to publish something. So I ended up Googling book publishing companies in my hometown, Johnson City, and Jan Carroll popped up. And so I contacted her. And even though The Mermaid Story was the first book I wrote, I actually ended up doing the Peacock story first. So I published that one first because it was in memory of my father. And one of the characters is named Jerry after my dad. So yeah, so that's kind of how I got into it. And I can tell you about the other two books right now, or I can stop and talk about the others, whatever y'all want to do.
Well, I was going to say about the peacock is that I was reading mythology. I used to read a lot of mythology, and Hera had there was I think it was Argos was her protector, and she gave him eyes all over his body. And so that's, mythologically speaking, that was the connection with the peacock, was that one. And I'm not sure if I got his name right or not, because it's been a long time since I've read it, but I do remember that there was a connection there. And so when you were talking about the protection, that also signaled to me the story that I read in mythology. But before you tell us about your other books, could you tell us about the difference that you feel in when you look at your colleagues who have written novels compared to children's stories? What do you feel like is the difference there for you?
I guess for me, like, mine is more like, I don't know if innocent's the right word, but it's more, I guess, simple because you're writing for children, and I guess my goal was to kind of teach like life lessons. For instance, the Peacock book. So Pierre the Peacock is very, very beautiful, but he knows he's beautiful. And so he thinks that people want to be his friends based on how beautiful he is. And so he meets Jerry, which is a colorblind little boy. And he says, Jerry, look at me. Don't you want to be my friend? Look how beautiful I am. And Jerry's like, well, I don't know how beautiful you are because I can't see the colors in your tail. So Pierre's like, you mean you can't see my beautiful shades of blue and green and yellow and purple? And Jerry's like, no, I'm colorblind. I can only see colors in black, white, and gray. And so Pierre says, well, I guess you don't want to be my friend because you can't appreciate how beautiful I am. So Jerry teaches Pierre that it's about what's inside, not what you look like on the outside, but how you treat people and the kindness that's within and the beauty that's within. That is how you'll get friends. So I guess for me, like, it's for these lifelong or these life lessons that hopefully will be lifelong lessons for children, that they'll learn simple things just from the book. So, but yeah. So it's funny because when I write, I want to write like I'm writing to maybe you two, but then I'm like, okay, wait, I have to know my audience and I have to like use kind of simpler words or phrases that will be more understandable. So yeah.
Speaking of your audience, I do have someone who is in your audience here. Journey, do you want to come up here and say something?
Hi.
So you read the Mermaid book.
Yes.
And you've read What Police Officers Do.
Yes.
So what are your feelings? Do you feel like you can understand the words well? Do you feel like it sent a good message?
Yeah, it did. I think my favorite out of the two is the Mermaid book because it teaches you how you can show your true colors and you can show what you do. And it doesn't matter if somebody doesn't like it, you can do it anyway.
I love that. That's awesome. Thank you so much. And that's exactly what the book was about, because Coral has a baby blanket and she's embarrassed, or not embarrassed by it. I mean, she's very proud of it, but she is invited to her first sleepover. And so she's nervous about going because she's not sure if her friends will make fun of her. And so you're absolutely right. Like, she takes her blanket anyway, and she wants to take it, and it brings her comfort. And so that's absolutely correct. So she does what she wants to do. Good job. I'm glad that got through.
Okay.
Well, you wrote it in a way that it would completely get through to anybody.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, that was the goal. So thank
you. Thank you, Journey.
I don't know if I'm going to do any spoilers, but Coral, when she goes to her sleep, has to take her baby blanket with her. And at first she's, on the fence about taking it because she's not sure if her friends will make fun of her. And so her mother tells her, well, if these are your real friends, they won't make fun of something that brings such comfort to you. And, so she's the last to get ready for bed. And she comes out, and every single one of her friends has their own baby blanket with different patterns on it. So yeah, so she fit right in, her blanket fit right in. So yeah, so that was something kind of cool about that. So yeah.
I really love that message. That's just such a good, positive message to send out to kids and adults too. I mean, we forget how we're so alike in so many ways. We always focus on those differences. So yeah, I think that's great. And I love that Courtney brought in her daughter to give you some great feedback too. How do you connect with your readers? With them being children, do you find opportunities to go out into the community, or do you find parent groups? What works for you?
So I have been basically reaching out to my local library. And I've tried to get into schools. Of course, COVID, put, the brakes on some things, but usually I go to my local library. I actually have a mermaid costume that I put on. I did not make it myself. I actually found it online, but yeah, it's like this whole big, I can send y'all a picture if you'd want to see it. It's on Instagram, but But yeah, so that's a lot of fun. I have a peacock skirt, little skirt with like little peacock feathers and like a little peacock, feather with a headband. And I haven't gone into, I don't have like a police officer costume or anything like that. I do have an angel costume. I haven't worn that yet. It was just published in August. So, but yeah, I actually ended up doing a book signing at Barnes and Noble in Johnson City back in August. So I'm trying to kind of get in and try to see where I can have, some book signings and that kind of thing. So, but generally I just try to get into some places locally, like local stores that sell children's books. So that's kind of how I'm getting in, there. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun. And I will have to tell you, and anybody who picks up my books will notice that I am not the illustrator of my books because I have no artistic ability whatsoever. So I had actually tried to draw a mermaid, and it was basically a mermaid. It was like a stick figure with a mermaid, and then with her baby blanket with the lobsters on it. My husband thought that she was holding a tray of shrimp. so, so my illustrations, my art skills or lack thereof leave a lot to be desired. So I definitely needed some professional help in that, well, in many ways, but especially in that way. So yeah. Yeah. So I wish I could do both. It's really cool when people can do both, but I was only blessed in one area.
Could you tell us now about your ride along that you did with the police officer
Yes.
that inspired your other books?
Yes. So this, my third book was What Do Police Officers Do? And when I lived in Johnson City, I worked with law enforcement. I worked for a domestic violence shelter, and I also worked for a children's advocacy center. And so, I was very familiar with police. So one of the detectives that I worked with at the Children's Advocacy Center encouraged me to sign up for the Citizens Police Academy. So it was 9 weeks long. It was like the best thing that I ever did. This was back in 2010, and I loved it. It was with the Johnson City Police Department. We learned everything from criminal investigation division, which is, detectives, the canine dogs, like patrolling and that kind of thing. I mean, it was just everything. So one of the things that we got to do a ride along, and it was just absolutely eye-opening and had, a tremendous effect on my life. It really did. And so, you get an up close and personal look at what police officers encounter, like the situations and calls they respond to, the people they interact with. And they did say, like, if there's a situation that's really, really, really dangerous, they will drop you off before they go. That never happened with me. So I was able to respond and go up to, like, if there was a traffic accident, I was able to kind of go up and kind of observe. So it was really, really great. It was definitely something that stayed with me. So, and I had actually, I had planned to publish the book in 2018. And it was January. I remember it was like mid to late January, and there had been a lot of police officers that had already been killed in the line of duty. And I was like, it's only January. There's been a lot of police officers who have already died. We still have the whole rest of the year to go. We have 11 more months to go. So I contacted my publisher and I was like, do you think we could do maybe a GoFundMe thing where, I could do a GoFundMe and then people could, pitch in for a cost of helping to publish. And then they get like a complimentary book that it could go anywhere across the country. Like I wanted it to be a huge thing where people from far away, could pitch in and it could go all across the country. I wanted it to be bigger than me. And so my publisher was, great with the idea and, getting ready to get it in motion. Well, then my mom died that April of 2018. And so I pivoted to the mermaid book in her memory to kind of help with my grieving process. So I did the mermaid book in her memory. again, to help with the grieving process. And so Coral's first sleepover came out. And so then I was like, you know what? 2020 is the year that my police officer book is going to come out. So I actually did, the GoFundMe went live on like March 5th. And then a week later, COVID shut everything down. And then 2 months later, the civil unrest happened. And so I feel, as a woman of faith, that the book came out when it was supposed to come out. It was published in 2021. And I feel like it wouldn't have had that same effect if it had been published sooner. And so what I do now, I've actually been sending copies of the police officer book to police departments all across the country. Like, if I ever read a report that there is a police officer who's been killed, then I will send a copy to that officer's family, and I'll send a copy to the police department of where the officer was a member of. And then I also was in a sorority in college, and we have an alumni directory, and it's divided up into different categories. And one of them is job related. And so I went through the law enforcement category of that and sent a letter to every single one of my sorority sisters and told them about this book that I had written. And if they, wanted a copy for it, I'd be glad to send them one. So I've gotten a lot of good feedback from that. I don't know if y'all remember do you remember the mass shooting that happened in Boulder, Colorado? It was March of 2021, I believe. There was an officer named Eric, I believe his name was Eric Talley. I'd have to check, but I think it's Eric Talley. And he was killed. And so I sent a copy of the book to the police department, and also a copy to he had like a wife and I think 5 or 6 kids. And so I sent a copy to the family, and then I sent one to the department. And I got an email back from the community officer and said that Eric had been a really good friend of his, and that it was a wonderful gesture, and that he, sent me pictures of him giving the book to the officer's widow. And I actually got like a little coin that had in memory of Officer Talley, and the quote that says, "Love has no greater, thing than laying down one's life for their friends." And I got like a police officer patch. And so as of right now, I might be going out there to do a book signing for the community sometime in the spring. We talked about that in the fall. Hopefully it'll come to fruition. But so that's something that I felt has been something that I can do for, the police officers out there, because it's been a hard few years for them, and they haven't felt like they've gotten a lot of support from a lot of different angles. And so that's something that I can do to let them know that they're appreciated.
Wow, that's incredible. I love that connection. And speaking of connections, it sounds like you have such a strong passion and connection to each of your books. Is there one that may be more special than the rest? I know it's hard to pick a favorite, so we won't say favorite, but which one do you have the strongest connection to?
I love how you said you can't pick a favorite. And I'm not a parent, I have for a baby, but having children didn't work out for my husband and myself. So I'm just writing children's books for other people's children. But I love how you said that, because it's like when you ask to pick your favorite book, you're kind of asking to pick your favorite child. So I liked how you phrased that. They all are so special to me for different reasons, and they were all inspired by different things. But the one that really stands out to me, it's not because it's the most recent that I did, but it's called An Angel Named Jonna. And I was telling you earlier, so my sorority sister in college was Jonna Berry. And most people in the Northeast Tennessee, Southwest Virginia area know about Jonna. So I met her at ETSU. She was 4 years younger than me. And so our time together overlapped for about a year, like for one, like the fall until the spring. And then I graduated. But when the week of initiation to the sorority, there is an active member who is assigned to a new member who's getting ready to be initiated. And so I was her inspiration sister, or what we call guardian angel. So I kind of guided her that week, into the week of her becoming initiated member. And so have a lot of good memories. Like she and I, after a sorority meeting in January, I went back to her apartment and we had hot chocolate. And then in the spring, she had this cute little convertible. So we went tolling around, it was finally starting to get warm. And so we had the top down. And I remember Phil Collins was playing. Something happened on the way to heaven, ironically, was playing. Like, didn't realize at the time, but it was going to mean something later on. So I end up graduating and I go out west to Yellowstone. And we lose touch, and I'm go to Indiana. And when I was in Indiana, I was actually working for our sorority headquarters. So I'm there at our sorority headquarters, and I find out that she was murdered. All three of my previous books, the Mermaid, Peacock, and Police Officer book, were all done by the same illustrator. And so when I got to do Jonna, I kind of wanted somebody to know her, that would, give it justice for the story, that somebody that knew her like I did. I mean, not like I did, because my relationship or my friendship with Jonna, but just somebody who knew her, because my illustrator before my other 3 books didn't know Jonna. And so I remembered there was a sorority sister of ours who had majored in art, and she actually lives in Knoxville. So I had contacted her, and it turns out I wanted her to do it, and she agreed, which was wonderful. So this was the first children's book that she had illustrated, and it was very special, that she knew her, and that she, when I was in town in August, I ended up going to Knoxville. Joan lives in Knoxville. And so I got to meet up with Joan and introduce Joan and Haley to each other. So the 3 of us had, a meal together. We ate lunch, and we went over to Barnes & Noble in Knoxville and signed some books, which was fun. But it was really special for me to be able to introduce the 2 of them. So, and then my first illustrator ended up retiring. So I'm hoping my illustrator for Donna's book, I hope she'll want to do some more books that I have planned. So I still have more that I've written more stories that my plan is to publish.
Wow, that's great. So what's next for you? Are you going to publish something you have written, or do you want to write something new?
So I have a few that I've already written. I've written one about a starfish, and I wrote one about a mermaid and a unicorn, because mermaids are pretty awesome by themselves. I love mermaids. And then I wrote one, and then unicorns are their own thing. So I actually wrote a story that has a unicorn and a mermaid in the same book. So that's pretty cool. And then I wrote another story, and you're probably going to know that this was inspired, where this inspiration came from. But there is a girl from Tennessee who goes to Maine, and she meets a mermaid. And the girl, the human, has always wanted to be a mermaid, and the mermaid has always wanted to be a human. I feel like if God can use my story to help, then like maybe the next thing I work on is a memoir. But I actually, you might find this interesting, Courtney. I've actually started thinking about another, like a horror novel that I'm kind of wanting to do. And I kind of have an idea about it. So I think I'm kind of open to other genres. And so, yes, so I'm kind of thinking I may have to pick your brain a little bit about it. So, but I think that I'm kind of wanting to spread my wings a little bit and get into some other stuff. So.
Merry Christmas!
Merry Christmas!
Merry Christmas! And a happy New Year!
And a